Big Shaq finds a girl and a baby fainted in a park. What he carries home isn't just broken bodies. It's a branded child, a hunted secret, and a storm waiting at his gates. When the giant with a gentle heart opens his mansion doors, he doesn't just save them. He dares the darkness to come knock. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. It was the kind of morning that didn't belong to any particular season. Gray, dull, and heavy, like the sky had forgotten whether it should cry or just hang there and watch. The grass in the city park was still slick from the night's mist, and birds hadn't bothered showing up. That kind of morning, the kind where even the wind whispered instead of whistling. Big Shaq, known in whispers as Giant with a Gentle Heart, walked the park path alone. He did this every few days, not out of habit, but because he needed to. The silence grounded him. The streets in this old Midwestern town had grown quieter over the years, but the silence wasn't peace. It was hush, a hush born from history, the kind of silence that once screamed with prejudice and now simply simmered in uncomfortable smiles and long-held stares. Shaq never walked with guards, didn't like the image, didn't need it either. He believed in being present, in seeing what people refused, and then he saw them. A flash of pale against the worn wood of a park bench. A figure, still, slumped, fragile, young. A girl, no older than 20. At her side, curled like a comma into her body. A baby, too still, too quiet. He paused mid-step. Something in the air shifted, like the world inhaled and forgot how to let go. The path was empty. The few people in the park, joggers, a couple walking a dog, walked right past, eyes avoiding the bench like it wasn't even there. Shaq's feet moved before his thoughts caught up. The girl didn't flinch when he approached. Her skin was pale beneath dirt smudges. Her lips cracked, breathing, but barely. The baby, wrapped in a thin blanket, was ghost-like. No cries, no motion. Shaq leaned in, heart thudding in the hollow behind his ribs, and placed a giant hand against the child's chest. A faint rise, a breath, but slow, too slow. No one noticed. No one helped. Shaq didn't speak, didn't call for aid. He bent down, arms steady as stone, and lifted the girl with practiced ease, cradling her against one side. The baby he scooped gently into the other. In any other moment, the sight might have drawn attention. A 7-foot-tall man, carrying two lifeless bodies through a public park. But here, in this town, in this America, it was easier to look away. His Escalade was parked across the street, shadowed under bare-limbed trees. As he reached the passenger side and pulled open the door, a cool ripple ran down the back of his neck. Not quite a breeze, not quite instinct. He glanced sideways, just beyond the tree line where the path narrowed into the woods. There, a blur, movement, gone. A camera lens, a figure, a trick of nerve. He didn't linger. He slid them into the leather seats, wrapped the girl in a wool throw from the back, and tucked the baby tight against her chest. The car hummed alive with a soft push of a button. Music clicked on, a low Miles Davis track, trumpet notes like slow heartbeats. He turned it off. 15 minutes later, the mansion's gates closed behind him. The house was enormous but not excessive. Built from stone, restored with love, surrounded by trees like watchmen. Inside, the staff knew better than to question Shaq when he wore that quiet around his shoulders, like armor. He took the girl straight to the guest wing, laid her on a chaise near the sunroom. The baby? He called for Dr. Vila, his on-call physician, and handed the child to her with a simple instruction: don't call anyone, just save them. Dr. Vila raised a brow but nodded. She knew Shaq's silences always meant something. As they tended to the baby and placed an IV in the girl's arm, Shaq stood by the large window, watching the trees sway in a wind that hadn't existed an hour ago. His fingers tapped against the glass rhythmically, not nervous, calculating. Alert.
That feeling again.
Like he was meant to find them. By late afternoon, the girl stirred. Her eyes fluttered open slowly, confusion swimming through the haze. She looked around, not startled, not relieved, cautious. Her gaze stopped when it landed on Shaq. Her mouth moved before sound came. A rasp, barely audible. Where's he? Shaq didn't move. Who's he? She blinked slowly. The man, with the ring. Is he here? Shaq narrowed his eyes. You mean the baby's father? She flinched, recoiled just slightly. No. He's no one's father. Shaq didn't ask more. Not yet. The baby was stable, fed, sleeping. Dr. Vela said he had signs of minor dehydration, but nothing life-threatening. A strange bruise on the ankle, though. Faint. Circular. Shaq didn't like the look of it. As the sun dipped low, casting amber streaks across the marble floor, the girl sat up, blanket clutched to her chest. She said her name was Delara. Just that. No last name. No age. No backstory. Only I was supposed to keep him safe. Who? Shaq asked. She looked at the baby through the open door to the nursery, and whispered, him. Then she passed out again. That night, Shaq didn't sleep. Instead, he reviewed footage from the mansion's gate cameras. At 4:16 a.m., just before dawn broke, the camera picked up movement along the west hedge. A figure, tall, wearing what looked like a long coat, head tilted slightly toward the nursery window. No face visible, no direct threat, but the presence was undeniable. And whoever it was, they didn't approach. They just watched. The stillness of the morning had passed. What remained now was motion waiting to turn into action. Something had changed. Shaq stood at the edge of the nursery, watching the baby breathe. His massive form barely fit in the doorframe. His eyes sharp under the soft lamplight. He wasn't just worried, he was calculating. The pieces didn't make sense, but the feeling in his gut, that was familiar. This wasn't random. Someone wanted that child. And whoever he was, the man Delara whispered about, wasn't finished yet. Shaq wasn't just housing a mystery. He was now inside it. The mansion sat in silence. Not empty, but watchful, as if the walls themselves were waiting for answers. The chandeliers above the main hallway shimmered faintly in the late afternoon light, catching the sun just enough to throw soft gold over the polished floors. A record played somewhere faintly in the background. Saxophone, low and slow like it was trying not to be heard. Shaq stood near the nursery door, arms folded, gaze heavy on the baby sleeping soundly in the crib. The quiet wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that the girl Delara, as she'd whispered earlier, had been moved to a guest suite in the west wing, its tall arched windows letting in the remaining orange of sunset. Her body had responded to fluids, and color had returned to her face, but her expressions remained hollow, distant, as if she was physically here but somewhere else entirely. Dr. Vela had checked both her and the child, running quick diagnostics. No signs of abuse on the girl. The baby, however, had that single troubling mark on his back, small and faint, but intentional, a branded circle, barely bigger than a coin, deliberate. Mark. Shaq hadn't reacted when Vela pointed it out. He just nodded once, a deep internal shift visible only in the way his jaw tightened. He'd seen that mark before, years ago. George, a rural charity outreach that spiraled into a police investigation, something buried in bureaucracy before it ever reached public headlines. He remembered children with vacant eyes in that same circle branded low on their backs, all wearing oversized church shirts that hung over their knees like uniforms. He didn't mention that to Delara. Not yet. The girl didn't speak again until evening had rolled in full, and the house lights were warm against the approaching darkness. Shaq had dinner brought to her room. She didn't touch the food, just stared at the plate, fingers loosely holding a spoon she never used. He entered without knocking, his large frame filling the doorway. She tensed at first, her hands instinctively drawing the blanket tighter around her legs, but she didn't flee. That was telling. It wasn't him she feared. Shaq walked in slow, deliberate. He didn't ask how she was feeling. He didn't ask what had happened. He just sat in the armchair near the window, the one facing slightly away so she wouldn't feel stared at. He waited. Minutes passed. I didn't steal him, she said suddenly, voice so soft it barely made it across the room. Shaq didn't respond. Not yet. I know what people are going to say. That I took someone's baby. That I made it up. His voice came calm, low. You haven't told me anything to make up. She looked down at the spoon. His name is Reeve. I named him that. It's not his real name. I don't know what his real name is. Shaq sat up just enough to lean his elbows onto his knees, watching her, not crowding her. Where did you find him? Her eyes met his, not with challenge, but exhaustion. Off Highway 47. There's a gas station near a broken-down church. I stopped there to sleep. It was raining. I heard him crying from a car in the back lot. No one was around. Door was unlocked. The back seat had blankets, bottles, and him. I waited hours. No one came. Shaq frowned slightly. You didn't call the police? I couldn't. Her voice cracked. They would have sent me back. To who? She looked away. It doesn't matter. Shaq didn't push, but her reaction said plenty. She wasn't just scared of trouble. She was scared of being returned to something worse than being alone. You think someone was chasing you? He asked. Delara nodded. Barely. They knew I left, knew I took him. There's always eyes, always people watching. Especially if you're one of the ones who was supposed to stay quiet. Shaq took a breath. Who are they? Delara hesitated, her lips parting, then closing again. Her eyes were glassy, not from tears, but from remembering. They're not a gang, not a cult, not in the way people think. They don't advertise. They call themselves a home for the fallen. People give them money because they use words like healing and restoration. But it's lies, it's obedience, and control. She paused. They take babies, the ones no one wants. They say they're raising them in faith. But it's about power, about keeping something pure. I don't even know what that means anymore. I stopped asking. Shaq clenched his jaw again, feeling the memory of Georgia clawing back into his mind. And they marked him. Yes, she whispered. Like he was property. Shaq rose slowly. Did they mark you? Delara hesitated, then shifted her arm, pulling back the sleeve of the sweater she was wearing. There, etched into the inside of her wrist, was a faded circle, same symbol, smaller, almost healed over. He didn't react with shock, just nodded. I got out when they made me kneel in the rain, for 5 hours, because I asked who the baby's mothers were. She said. I was told I wasn't worthy of the answer. Shaq crossed the room, stood by the window. Outside, the trees rustled in a low breeze. I saw someone outside last night. Her body went rigid. You think it was them? I think someone's watching. That means time isn't on our side. Delara's voice shook. Please don't call the cops. Please. Shaq turned to her. You think I'd hand you over after bringing you here? I've had people smile and still throw me to wolves. He stared at her, long and hard. I don't smile much. That pulled a bitter half-smile from her lips, the first sign of any softness since she arrived. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I just wanted to get him far enough that they'd lose interest. I don't have a plan. You don't need one, Shaq said. You just need to stay.
Rest. Let me figure this out.
A long pause followed. Then she asked the question he'd been waiting for. Why are you helping me? Shaq stepped closer, voice steady. Because I know what it feels like to be looked at like a problem, and I know what it means when someone doesn't look away. She nodded slowly. That night, Shaq had the baby's room moved to a more secure part of the mansion. Reinforced windows, new locks, quiet cameras installed that even the staff wouldn't notice. As he stood once more outside the nursery door, he looked at the baby sleeping peacefully in the crib, the tiny mark still hidden beneath soft pajamas. He didn't know who this child really was. But he was damn sure going to find out why someone marked him like a thing and why this girl ran to save him instead of herself. And why, despite all of it, the world outside wanted them both to disappear. Inside this house they'd be seen. But outside, the quiet was turning into a hum. And the ones who don't run, they usually know exactly what's chasing them. The town didn't change much, not in ways that mattered. The storefronts got fresh coats of paint, new flags hung from rusted brackets, and downtown threw together a summer festival once a year to prove it still had heart. But beneath it all, the bones remained the same, the glances the undercurrent, the way whispers moved faster than facts, and how names were never just names. They were identities carved into the town's memory like initials in a park bench. Shaq O'Neal had long lived with the weight of being both beloved and mistrusted. A hometown hero to some, a symbol to others. When he built the mansion just outside the historic district, there were rumors he was trying to separate himself, though the truth was he just wanted space. He'd spent his life in arenas. Now he wanted quiet. And when he found the girl and the baby, he didn't think twice. It was instinct. It was human. But in a town like this, human didn't always translate. The first headline didn't use his name. Just former athlete takes in unknown woman and infant. Police not notified. It was the kind of headline that didn't need to accuse. It let the comments section do the work. Shaq's assistant, Glenna, brought it to him early in the morning, her hands tight around her phone like it might burn her.
They're asking if you've been in touch with CPS, she said. They're spinning it like you might be part of something.
Shaq didn't even look up from his coffee. They've been waiting for a chance like this. Let him talk. But the town wasn't just talking, it was moving. Within 2 days, media vans lined the service road, just past the iron gates. Cameras on tripods, people leaning across hedges to catch a glimpse. One reporter tried to drone over the property, but Glenna had it shot down with legal threats before it cleared the trees. Inside, tension coiled tighter. The staff worked quieter, unsure of what they were walking into each day. No one questioned Shaq to his face, but behind closed doors, the hum of worry echoed in kitchens and side halls. Was this going to explode? Was this girl dangerous? Delara felt it too. She stayed mostly in the West Wing, away from windows. She carried Reeve like a shield, clutching him tighter whenever new noise filtered in from outside. Shaq checked on her without hovering. He brought her books, silent meals, even a radio at one point. She rarely turned it on. Most of her conversations happened in fragments. Bits and pieces dropped like puzzle pieces, with no image to guide their placement. "I didn't know people would notice," she said one night, standing by the hallway mirror, Reeve asleep in her arms. I thought you were big enough to make it safe." Shaq raised an eyebrow. "Big enough? You're someone who doesn't get questioned," she said, half sarcastic, half sincere. Didn't realize the world still finds ways to twist kindness. He didn't answer, but the way he looked at her, steady, grounded, said he understood more than she could imagine. That morning, the first real spike came. A note, tucked in a black envelope, left at the front gate. It wasn't mailed. It wasn't addressed. Just placed. Glenna found it. She handed it to Delara, without reading it, assuming it was more tabloid bait. Delara read one line, turned ghost white, and without saying a word walked to the fireplace in the drawing room and burned it to ash. Shaq wasn't there. But the cameras were. Later that night, when reviewing the gate feed with his tech guy, Shaq saw the footage. A man, tall, hooded, moving without hesitation, walked up to the gate, just after midnight. He didn't ring the bell, didn't hesitate, just slipped the envelope through and walked away. Delara didn't say anything about it. But she locked her door that night, from the inside, twice. The next day, Shaq broke the rhythm.
"You're gonna need to tell me the whole truth," he said, standing by the large window in her room. She sat in the armchair, Reeve in her lap, both facing the sunlight like it might wash them clean.
She didn't argue. She didn't lie. But she didn't unravel all at once either. "I was raised in places like this town, places that smile at you while cutting you from the inside out," she said. "When you're too quiet, too soft, they think you're broken. People like him. He looks for that. Finds the cracks, fills them with control." Shaq listened, not interrupting. "I wasn't the first girl there. Not the youngest. I think I was one of the few who tried to leave twice. Most just give up, or get given away." "To who?" Shaq asked. She looked down at Reeve. "He was meant for someone. I don't know who, but they were preparing him for something. They called him special, a symbol of purity. Their words, not mine. The mothers don't get to choose. They don't even know." Shaq swallowed hard. "You said they marked him. What does the symbol mean?" She blinked. "Tired. Ownership. Belonging. Or sacrifice. Depends on who's interpreting it. They call it the circle of return. Like once you're inside it, you never get out, unless someone takes you out." Shaq leaned against the wall, the weight in his chest heavier than he'd felt in years. "And they're coming?" "They never stop," she whispered. That night someone shouted outside the gate, a woman's voice, crying, begging to be let in. Security rushed to the monitors. But by the time they got there, the woman was gone. Left behind was a small battered shoe, child-sized, set upright on the stone. Shaq held it in his hand the next morning, looked at it for a long time, didn't say a word. Inside, the mansion felt smaller. The noise outside louder. Even the jazz records couldn't cover the tension anymore. Then came the church flyer. Mailed to the mansion directly. No stamp, no sender. Just a folded sheet with a picture of a pastoral retreat, smiling families, and in the bottom corner, a photo of a man in a white suit, hand raised mid-sermon. He had no name printed, but Shaq recognized the posture, the expression. It was charisma disguised as salvation. He brought the flyer to Delara. Her hand trembled the moment she saw it. "His name is Elian Ward," she whispered. "And if they sent this, it means they're not just watching anymore." Shaq stood by the window again, eyes drawn to the world beyond. The same town that once clapped for him now stared with suspicion. They didn't see the fight coming. They didn't want to. But Shaq? He'd seen enough wolves in his life to know when the woods were lying. And this wasn't just about a girl and a baby anymore. This was about everything that tried to hide behind concern while keeping the systems of silence alive. Shaq stood at the head of the dining room table, a phone pressed to his ear, not moving even as steam curled from his untouched coffee. Across the line, a voice returned after years of silence, measured low and slightly weathered by time. "Didn't expect your name to show up on my phone again," said Donovan Cray, retired FBI analyst, former undercover coordinator, and a man who owed Shaq more than one favor. "I've got something strange," Shaq said. A girl showed up. No last name, bruised, scared out of her mind. Said her name is Delara. She had a baby with her. Said she found him abandoned. But something's off. I need eyes on this from your end. Quiet eyes. Cray didn't ask questions. Shaq couldn't answer. He never had. Send me everything. Names, pictures, time, place. I'll run it. By midday, Cray called back. There's no Delara missing. No match by first name, face, or fingerprint in any official system. She's a ghost. And the baby? That's where it gets stranger, Cray said. The baby's description, weight, age, it matches a report filed in Missouri 3 months ago. Infant male, taken from a church-owned group home. But here's the kicker. There's no active search. Shaq narrowed his eyes. What do you mean, no search? I mean it's filed, but flagged as internal custody dispute. The state didn't escalate it. Family didn't pursue. Case is buried under social work logs. Shaq looked across the room, where Reeve lay napping in a sunbeam, his small body rising and falling in steady rhythm. So the baby's missing, but nobody's looking? Exactly. Shaq hung up, his chest heavier now, thoughts racing behind calm eyes. If Delara had lied, she had done it with commitment. But if she had told the truth, even parts of it, then someone had buried the story of this baby, so deep it was never meant to be found again. That afternoon, Shaq walked into the guest suite. Delara sat cross-legged on the rug, Reeve beside her playing with a worn stuffed bear. She looked up the moment she heard him enter. Her posture shifted, rigid, alert, but not afraid. She was expecting this. I had someone run a check, he said, cutting the air between them with directness. You don't exist in any system, but he does. Delara looked down at Reeve, brushing a hand gently across his back. They told me that would happen. Shaq didn't move closer. You want to explain? She hesitated, lips trembling before she finally spoke. I didn't kidnap him. I didn't say you did. I know how it looks, she whispered. I know what it sounds like. But I didn't take him from someone who loved him. I took him from people who were using him. From where? A church compound off the interstate. It's not on maps. They run it under a foundation name. Women go in. Babies come out. Some stay. Some disappear. Shaq studied her face, searching for the seams in her story.
I was there for almost a year, she continued. They kept us quiet. We were called seekers. Every girl had a handler. The babies, they were categorized, tracked, branded.
You left with Reeve? I left for him. I knew I couldn't get far on foot, so I waited until a handler left his car unlocked during a storm. I drove for hours, abandoned the car, slept in stations, rest stops. I didn't have a plan. I just knew I had to get him away. Shaq folded his arms. Why him? Why that baby? She looked up at him, her eyes fierce and unblinking. Because they called him the inheritance. Because they said he was born under a blood moon. Because they said he had a purpose that made the others look disposable. Shaq didn't say anything. The room felt too small for the weight now hovering between them. I didn't know where to go, Delara said. Then I saw you. On TV. That day in the diner. A rerun of you at the fundraiser in Detroit. I remembered you because you talked about second chances and the silence that swallows people who don't make headlines. You came looking for me? No, she admitted. But when I saw the billboard for your sports academy outside town, it felt guided, like it was the first time in months I wasn't walking blind. Shaq nodded slowly. Still something nagged at him. You know a lot about Reeve. More than someone who just found a child. Delara's hands gripped her knees. They used to make us memorize files. Backgrounds. Genetics. History of abandonment. They treated it like scripture. I only remembered his because they said I wasn't clean enough to be his mother. Silence settled like dust. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky burned orange, Shaq sat in his study. He hadn't spoken much since their conversation, just observed, thought, replayed her words, looked for cracks that weren't there. He pulled Reeves' baby bag from the corner where it had been stashed since their arrival. The bag was ordinary, canvas, soft edges, pale blue with faded cloud prints. But inside, beneath layers of wipes and spare clothes, was something he hadn't seen before. A small pacifier sealed in a plastic case. Not used. Not dirty. It looked almost ceremonial in the way it was packed. He held it up to the light. Etched into the rubber handle were 2 initials. Shaq froze. Those weren't Reeves' initials. Not unless that name was real. But more than that, those initials triggered something else. Memory. He remembered a woman named Alara Roslin, a pediatric consultant who once worked with a rural outreach program he supported 6 years ago. She'd helped build screening kits for newborns in low-income communities. Quiet woman. Sharp mind. She disappeared 2 years ago. Her family said she quit medicine. No social media, no professional trace since. The last time Shaq saw her, she was walking into a private gala hosted by the same church that now loomed in whispers around Alara's story. He set the pacifier down, the plastic case still cool in his palm. Something about this wasn't just about a baby and a lost girl anymore. Someone had gone to great lengths to hide Reeves' identity. But someone else had also made sure the right person found him. And now, that someone was circling again, the mansion had started to feel less like a home, and more like a shelter built on borrowed time. Its wide corridors, once filled with a kind of peaceful quiet, now carried tension that pulsed under every creak of the floorboards and hum of surveillance feeds. The staff spoke softer, the air felt denser, even the walls seemed to hold their breath. Delara sat across from Shaq in the library, framed by books that spanned everything from sports biographies to historical texts on systemic racism and power. She hadn't touched her tea, her fingers curled around the cup like it was a grounding stone, but she didn't drink. "You want the full truth," she said finally, her voice raw. "Not pieces, not safe versions. All of it?" Shaq nodded once. "Steady." Delara took a breath that seemed to drag years out of her chest. "His name is Elian Ward. He runs what he calls a faith home. It's tucked back past the river highway in northern Missouri, nowhere on a map. Everyone in town calls it the Haven. But it's not a haven, it's a trap." Shaq didn't flinch. The name stirred something inside him. Familiarity. Unsettled memory. "I ended up there 2 years ago. I'd just been kicked out of a youth shelter in Ohio. No ID. No family. I got a pamphlet from a woman, on the street. Said the Haven took in girls like me, fed them, gave them purpose. And at first it was clean. Kind. Too kind." She looked down, her face hollowing, as the past flooded back. "They stripped us of everything. Phones, names, even birthdays. We weren't people, we were daughters of renewal. We wore the same clothes, prayed the same prayers. You couldn't speak unless asked, couldn't ask questions unless you wanted to be reset. That meant isolation, silence, darkness, sometimes for days." Shaq leaned forward slightly, arms resting on his knees. "And the children? They were the end goal," she said, her voice tightening. "Every girl eventually graduated into motherhood. Some were already pregnant. Others weren't. You were given a child. You didn't carry them. You didn't birth them. You just raised them until they were chosen." "What does that mean?" Shaq asked, his voice like thunder wrapped in cotton. "They were taken," she said. "Rehomed. Reassigned. Disappeared. The chosen ones never came back. You didn't ask where they went. You didn't cry, or they'd tell you your tears meant you weren't ready, that you weren't pure enough." Her hands shook. She let go of the cup. "And Reeve?" Shaq asked. "He wasn't born there. He was brought in special. They didn't give him to anyone for the first few months. He was kept in a different part of the compound. Cleaner, quieter. Rumor was he came from someone important. A doctor, maybe. They called him the inheritance. They marked him early." Shaq felt the temperature in the room drop, not literally, but spiritually. His thoughts darted to the brand, the initials, the pacifier. "You took him," he said, though it wasn't a question. "I had to," she whispered. "The day I left, I overheard a conversation. 2 men in suits, real polished types. One of them mentioned a date. A location. Said they were prepping Reeve for a private transfer. Shaq's jaw tightened. Like property. Exactly. So I waited until night. One of the guards had left his keys in the laundry hall. I snuck into the nursery, took Reeve, and drove until the car gave out. Then we walked. Hitched. Slept in bathrooms. When I saw your billboard, I thought maybe, just maybe, someone would care. She paused, looking up. You do, don't you? Shaq met her eyes. Firm and unshaken.
I do.
And I know who Elian Ward is. Delara blinked, stunned. You've heard of him? Shaq stood and crossed to a side cabinet, opening it to reveal a box of gala invitations and press packets from years past. He pulled out a trifold brochure. On the cover, a younger Elian Ward in a sharp ivory suit, smiling wide with arms outstretched beneath the words, Faith Beyond the Fold. The date stamped on the back was 7 years ago. I met him at a benefit in Baton Rouge, Shaq said. He was charming, clean-cut, preached about redemption and purpose, claimed his home had saved dozens of young girls from abuse and addiction. The crowd ate it up. I gave a donation that night. Delara's voice shook. You didn't know. I should have, Shaq said. There was something too smooth about him. The way he spoke, like he was always selling something. That night, Shaq had every exterior security camera on the property recalibrated. He didn't ask permission. He issued instructions. No staff in or out without check-in. No press on the grounds. Surveillance at the gates doubled. But what he didn't expect came at 2:34, a soft electronic ping from the west lawn perimeter. The footage loaded grainy at first. A blinking red dot hovered above the treetops, weaving low and slow, like a vulture circling prey. A drone. No logos. No commercial tags. It hovered for 31 seconds over the nursery window before pulling back. But it wasn't just the drone that made Shaq's stomach twist. It was the figure beneath it. In the shadows by the tree line stood a man in a long coat. Still, watching. Head tilted just slightly toward the mansion. He never moved, never approached, but he stood there long enough to be captured. And then just as silently, he stepped back into the woods. Shaq hit pause. Rewind. Zoomed in. The face wasn't visible. But the posture, it was enough. He showed Delara the next morning. She turned away before the screen even finished loading. He's here. Shaq's voice was a rumble. He knows where you are. Delara nodded, slowly. He always does. You can't hide from someone who thinks he owns you. Shaq stared at the image one last time before shutting off the screen. I'm not hiding, he said. I'm preparing. Delara's shoulders dropped with something close to relief, but her eyes carried the same weight they always had, like she still expected to run again. He's not coming to talk, she said quietly. No, Shaq agreed. He's coming to reclaim, and he doesn't think anyone will stop him. He turned to the window, the trees beyond whispering in the wind like secrets trying to get out. But this wasn't a secret anymore. This was a reckoning. Reeve's cries started next. Not the newborn wails of discomfort, but sharp, panicked cries that echoed through the nursery every night at 3:17 a.m. The same time, without fail, Delara would bolt awake, breathless, drenched in sweat. She wouldn't remember her dreams, only that something cold had been sitting at the foot of her bed. Once, Glenna found her in the hallway, barefoot, standing in front of a closed guest room door she hadn't entered in weeks. I was trying to get out, Delara whispered later. Even in my sleep. Shaq didn't say anything then. But by the next day, the entire property had a new security infrastructure. Motion detectors, heat sensors, biometric locks, cameras with night vision clarity. He brought in Cray again, no longer just as an analyst, but now as a strategist. Whatever Elian was planning, Shaq wasn't going to wait for the damage to measure his response. Cray came with files. Thick ones. Photos, donation trails, sealed court transcripts. They sat together in the study for hours, while Delara watched Reeve nap in the sunroom down the hall. Cray laid it out piece by piece. Elian's reach wasn't limited to the Haven. He had friends in political circles, connections with church donors who scrubbed public records clean, and backdoor favors exchanged in return for silence. The compound had been reported 3 times over the last decade. Every time, the charges evaporated. Everyone who tried to expose him either disappeared or was discredited, Cray said. Whistleblowers recanted. Witnesses withdrew. One woman ended up institutionalized for hallucinations. Let me guess, Shaq muttered. She wasn't crazy. She said she saw babies being cataloged, Cray replied. She was ignored. Delara listened from the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself. You think I'm next? Shaq turned to her. You think they'll stop at you? That night she tried to leave. No bags, no sound, just bare feet and shaking hands as she crept down the east staircase. The door alarm tripped, soft but insistent. By the time she opened the side exit, Shaq was already there, leaning against the frame, like he'd been waiting. I can't stay, she said, voice brittle. I've already brought enough of that man's curse into your life. You think you brought danger to me? Shaq asked, his tone low but sharp with something deeper. Girl, I was born into it, learned to walk in it. You didn't drag a storm in here. They did. She shook her head. You don't know what he does to people like you. Shaq took a step closer, not threatening, but immovable. And people like you don't know what it means to finally stop running. She didn't move, didn't speak. The wind outside rustled the trees, brushing the air with a strange electric static, as if something unseen had been pushed back for a moment. Then Delara stepped back inside. But the storm wasn't done. 2 nights later, Reeve disappeared. He had been asleep in the nursery. Shaq had passed the door during his midnight sweep, heard the gentle whir of the white noise machine, the steady breathing of the boy. Nothing out of the ordinary. But at 3:08, when Delara jolted awake again, this time with a scream, Shaq ran to the nursery and found the crib empty. The door hadn't been opened. The windows were locked. No security alarms tripped. No cameras triggered. He called the staff. Cray, Glenna. They searched every room, every blind corner. Panic didn't rise in Shaq's chest. It simmered, deadly and focused. He didn't shout. He didn't pace. He hunted, eyes sharp, breath even. They found Reeve 20 minutes later. He was in the library, wrapped in the same blanket, unharmed, eyes wide open, awake, but silent. And in his hand was something that no one had given him. A tiny gold bracelet, barely bigger than a ring. Engraved on its inner edge were the words, "The chosen are always claimed." Delara broke when she saw it. Her knees buckled, her mouth opened, but no sound came. Glenna caught her just before she collapsed. Shaq took the bracelet, held it between 2 fingers like it was poisoned. His face remained unreadable, but his hands, those hands that had lifted trophies, shielded children and built homes, were shaking. He placed the bracelet in a sealed bag. Cray would analyze it, trace it, match it. But Shaq already knew what it meant. This wasn't a warning. This was a message. A statement. Reeve had never been lost. He'd been placed, watched, cataloged, and now, claimed again. The next morning, Shaq stood in the backyard, where sunlight painted the grass in long gold lines. He watched Delara sway with Reeve in her arms, her eyes vacant, her mouth pressed to the baby's temple like a silent prayer. The mansion, beautiful as it was, had become a map of trauma, every room marked by a question, every shadow hiding a threat. But still Shaq didn't flinch, didn't leave, because the truth wasn't just inside this house now. It was built into it. This wasn't just where pain was remembered. It was where a war had begun. When Shaq agreed to the interview, Glenna tried to talk him out of it. The legal team nearly pulled out. Even Cray questioned the timing, but Shaq didn't waver. He wasn't interested in protecting himself. He was done with quiet resistance. This time, he wasn't going to whisper truth behind closed doors. He was going to shout it. The show was national. Late night. The kind of platform that still hit hard when the lights were right and the guest didn't hide behind PR polish. Shaq didn't bring a suit. He wore a black sweater, clean jeans, and a pair of worn sneakers. No frills, no armor, just clarity. The host, Dorian Mays, welcomed him like an old friend, but there was an edge in the air. Everyone knew Shaq's name was in the tabloids, the mansion, the girl, the baby, the rumors, but no one knew the real story, not yet. They talked first about his past, his work in underserved communities, his decision to live quietly after retirement. Then Dorian leaned forward. There's been speculation, Shaq, he said gently but clearly, that you're harboring someone, that a child in your care may not legally belong to you. Can you speak to that? Shaq didn't blink.
I can speak to the silence, he said. The silence we've all grown used to. The kind that wraps itself in faith and charity while it tears apart lives. The kind of system that labels children as burdens until someone else decides they're assets.
The audience shifted. Dorian sat back, watching. There's a place out there, Shaq continued, that calls itself a home, A place run by a man in a white suit, who uses God's name like a license to erase people. Girls are stripped of their names, babies are branded, and nobody's been listening. Because the people making the noise don't look like people you trust. A hush swept through the studio. Then Shaq pulled a photo from his pocket. It was printed, not digital. Old school. He unfolded it on the desk in front of him. It showed Reeve, fast asleep in his crib, the branded circle on his back just barely visible beneath his shirt. "That's the mark," Shaq said. "It's been found on multiple children. Every time it gets buried. Every time someone with influence decides the investigation's too delicate. I've been silent too long. I know I'll be sued. I know I'll be threatened. But I'm not here to protect myself." He looked directly into the camera. "I'm here to make sure no one forgets this face," he said, "because the wolves wear ties, and their god wears gold." The footage aired at 11:35 p.m. Eastern. By midnight, it was already trending. By morning, it had 8 million views across platforms. And by the next afternoon, Shaq's legal team received a lawsuit. Defamation, slander, emotional distress, filed by the Haven Restoration Group, on behalf of Elian Ward. Delara found out about the interview while sitting on the nursery floor, watching Reeve stack wooden blocks. The volume on the TV was low, but she could still hear Shaq's voice. When he held up the photo, her hands began to shake. She touched her wrist, the faded mark still ghosting her skin, and wept, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, broken sound that carried more truth than 1,000 words. No one had ever spoken for her. Not like that. Not with the whole world watching. Calder called the next morning. He was a veteran journalist, once respected, now mostly ignored. Too many controversial stories, too many fights with editors, but he'd never stopped chasing what mattered. And after seeing Shaq's segment, he made his move. "I've been following Elian for 6 years, Calder told Shaq. "The church donations, the children moved between states, with no documentation, the way every girl who escapes disappears again a month later, either off-grid or dead. I've got footage, interviews, financial records, former staff, former daughters. I'm releasing all of it." Shaq didn't ask for proof. He knew Calder well enough to trust his instincts. The expose aired online within 24 hours. A 30-minute docuseries packed with testimonies that shattered what little innocence remained around the Haven. Former members showed their marks. A nurse described forged adoption records. A security guard admitted to shuttling infants out under fake transportation orders. And then came the line that cracked it wide open. A former high-ranking handler sat across from Calder, face blurred, voice distorted. "They called that baby Reeve the heir," the handler said. "Said he was born of someone special. That he was meant to inherit Elian's legacy." The footage cut to hospital records, altered birth certificates, duplicate social security applications, and then the twist that dropped like a stone into deep water. Reeve's biological mother hadn't disappeared. She was dead, listed as a suicide. 2 days after Delara escaped. Her name, Alara Roslin. A pediatric consultant. A known advocate for children's rights. She had been missing from public life for nearly 2 years. Her death was never widely reported. Just an obituary in a small-town paper, listed as complications from depression. Delara found the article first. She sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, the screen casting a cold glow over her face. "She was trying to help us," she said. "She must have gotten close. Too close." Shaq stood behind her, silent. He remembered Delara, her voice, her work, her vanishing. And now, knowing Reeve was her son, everything twisted tighter. "This is why they want him back," Delara whispered. "He's not just a child to them. He's proof, evidence, and legacy." Outside, the world was no longer quiet. Protesters gathered at the Haven. Politicians called for investigations. Church donors backed out. The IRS flagged the foundation for audits. And Elian Ward vanished. Again. But the fire was lit now, and it wasn't going out. Shaq knew this wasn't the end. They'd push back, they'd spin narratives, they'd drag his name through the dirt. But none of it mattered, because Reeve was safe. Delara was safe. And the silence that protected men like Elian, it was finally burning. Exposure had a cost. But this time, the truth was worth it. The early morning light spilled across the marble kitchen counters, catching the edges of stainless steel and casting long, sharp reflections. Shaq sipped his black coffee in silence, eyes fixed on the muted TV screen across the room. News anchors spoke in hushed tones over B-roll footage. Black SUVs pulling up to an old farmhouse. Agents in windbreakers ducking through narrow doorways, and worn-out barns with padlocked doors. The banner at the bottom of the screen read, "Federal Raid on Religious Compound. Connected to Child Trafficking Ring." Shaq's phone buzzed twice. Cray's voice came through like a drumbeat in fog. It was one of Ward's old properties. Farmhouse, 80 miles west of his last known compound. They found baby clothes, footage, unregistered IDs. Women too drugged to talk. But not him. He's gone. Again, Shaq said, half to himself. Every time we move, he disappears before the doors even cracked. Shaq ran a hand across his face. He's not moving alone. No. He's protected. Not just by money or believers, by infrastructure, people and systems, layers of obedience. In the other room, Delara sat at the piano bench, Reeve resting in her lap. She wasn't playing, just pressing soft keys with tired fingers, letting broken melodies rise and fall. She didn't look up when Shaq entered. "They found the video," he said quietly. "I know," she murmured. "I saw the broadcast." Shaq hesitated, watching her eyes glaze over as she stared ahead, not at the keys but through them. "I'm not surprised," she said after a beat. "That place had cameras in places you wouldn't believe. Behind mirrors. Under cribs. They weren't documenting care. They were building evidence. Control. They didn't find Ward. They never did." She looked down at Reeve and gently shifted him in her arms. "He's not gonna stop, is he?" "No," Shaq said. "But we aren't either." Later that day, the results came in. DNA testing. Standard procedure after Calder's exposé forced multiple investigations into potential trafficking. They had to confirm lineage who Reeve was. Biologically, Delara sat beside Shaq in the quiet of his study, clutching a balled-up tissue in one hand, the other gripping the armrest of the chair. Cray read the results over speaker. "No biological relation," he said. "Delara's not the mother. No parental match." She didn't cry right away. She just nodded. Once. Slowly. As if her body had braced for the blow but forgot how to absorb the pain. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew it the moment I held him. But I didn't care." Her voice cracked then. Her face dropped. Not because she'd been caught. Not because there was judgment in the room. But because the one truth that had tethered her to sanity was suddenly exposed and vulnerable. "I thought if I kept running with him long enough, maybe I'd get to stay with him," she sobbed. "Maybe love would be enough." Shaq leaned in, gently took her hand. "It still can be." The court proceedings moved fast in the weeks that followed. Delara wasn't charged. Her cooperation with the federal investigation painted her not as a kidnapper, but as a survivor and whistleblower. Reeve was assigned temporary protective custody. Shaq was named guardian, full responsibility, legal authority. A press conference followed. Not one he hosted, but one forced on him. Congress had summoned him to testify, not just as a witness, but as an advocate, someone who'd seen the rot from the inside out and refused to play quiet. He stood in front of a half-circle of politicians who shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure of how to speak to a man taller than any of them, richer than most, and carrying a moral clarity their chambers rarely heard. "I'm not here to give you names," Shaq said. "You already have them. They've been on your donation lists, your event flyers, your honorary boards. I'm here to ask why you didn't listen when the whispers turned to screams, why no one raised a hand when children started vanishing from places labeled as holy." He paused. "The men who build these systems don't wear ski masks. They wear ties. They smile for cameras. They tell broken people that obedience is the same as healing. And when the rest of us stay quiet, we're not just complicit, we're co-builders." Cameras clicked, flashes popped. The story hit national headlines again, this time with a different tone, less suspicion, more reckoning. Still, Shaq knew better than to relax. Exposure had created pressure. But pressure didn't always mean safety. So he moved them. Bought a private ranch outside Colorado Springs. Acres of land. No neighbors. No back roads leading to unknown gates. A place where the wind couldn't carry secrets. Where cameras were welcome, because they weren't peering in. They were keeping danger out. Delara took to the quiet. She started drawing again. Reeve took his first steps on that land, wobbly-footed and laughing in the open field. For a while it felt like they might actually build something whole. Until the envelope came. It was dropped at the ranch gate one morning. No postage. No fingerprints. No name. Just a plain off-white envelope addressed in smudged ink to Shaquille O'Neal. He opened it in the kitchen. Inside was a single photograph. Reeve, standing in the yard, hand reaching for a butterfly. The photo had been taken recently, within days, based on his clothes. He wasn't looking at the camera. But behind him, in the distance, near the tree line, a figure in white. Blurred, but there. Watch. Shaq's pulse slowed as he turned the photo over. On the back, scrawled in black ink, barely legible, "The boy remembers." He stood for a long time after that, not speaking, not blinking, just watching the image, studying the angle, measuring the implications. Word hadn't just resurfaced. He had never left. Shaq placed the photo on the table, pulled out his phone, and called Cray. "We're not done," he said. "Not even close. Because the thing about men like Elian Ward, they don't die. They multiply." 6 months had passed like water under an old bridge. Slow at first, then all at once. The days at the ranch took on a rhythm that didn't rely on sirens or headlines. Just the quiet assurance of routine. The kind of peace that wasn't loud or absolute, but earned. Shaq stood in the garden early that morning, the sky barely lit, dew clinging to the grass like the world hadn't yet decided what kind of day it wanted to become. He knelt near the lavender beds, calloused fingers working the soil like a man who needed to be reminded that growth was still possible, even after fire, even after root. Delara's laughter floated in from the porch, light and real. It was the kind of sound he hadn't heard from her in the early days. Unrestrained. She was holding a law textbook now, instead of a blanket she used to wrap herself in like armor. She was in community college 3 towns over, taking classes in criminal justice, showing up to class with her sleeves rolled up and her back straight. The scars hadn't faded, not fully, but they didn't define her anymore. They were history now, not destiny. Reeve toddled through the grass, chasing a monarch butterfly that kept outpacing him with teasing grace. His feet were still wobbly, arms flailing for balance, but his joy was unfiltered. His voice, still forming words, burst through in soft, unexpected clarity. Safe. It was his first real word. Delara looked up from her book, eyes wide. "What did you say, baby?" Reeve looked back smiling, hand pressed to his chest. "Safe." Shaq heard it too. He paused, soil in his hand, the scent of earth grounding him as the word echoed deeper than any victory speech or court testimony ever had. That word wasn't a mistake. It wasn't random. It was remembered, felt, lived. They had given him that. They had given each other that. The garden had always been Shaq's sanctuary, even back when the mansion felt more like a fortress. He built it not for aesthetics, but for truth. You couldn't fake things in the garden. Either it grew, or it didn't. Either it thrived, or it withered. People were the same way. He'd come to learn. And that bench, the one shaded beneath the old olive tree, held more than just worn wood and chipped edges. That was where he first brought Delara and Reeve. He hadn't planned to sit that day. Just carry them inside. But something in the stillness had made him pause, lower his massive frame onto the bench, holding them both like some broken equation he didn't know how to solve. That moment had lived in him ever since, quiet, pulsing, unforgettable, a loop he returned to when the world threatened to drown him in noise. Today he sat there again. The bench hadn't moved. The garden had grown around it. Sure, wildflowers crept closer now. Vines coiled nearby, but the bench remained steady, unmoved by seasons or headlines. Shaq leaned back and watched the two of them. Mother in all but biology, child born from chaos, play beneath the open sky. Their laughter wasn't a performance. It wasn't filtered for cameras. It was real, and it came from a kind of resilience most people would never understand. Glenna visited once a month now. Still loyal. Still sharp. She handled his PR without fanfare, running interference whenever media tried to twist the story back into scandal. Calder's documentary series had won a journalism award. Cray had gone deeper underground, working quietly with federal investigators, targeting not just Elian Ward, but the system that protected men like him. And Ward? Still missing. Rumors placed him overseas. Others whispered he was hiding in plain sight. Changed name, changed look. Shaq didn't care for the mythology. Monsters didn't deserve legends. But he never let his guard down. The ranch had security drones, infrared cameras, and silent alerts wired through every tree line. They didn't live in fear, but they lived aware. There was a difference. One afternoon, after Reeves' nap, Delara joined Shaq at the garden bench. Her notebook was open in her lap, legal terms scribbled across half a page. She tapped her pen absently. You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't found us? Shaq didn't answer right away. He just stared out at the field where the child now napped again under the shade of a wide elm, one chubby hand curled near his face. I don't think I found you, Shaq said finally. I think you were placed. Delara tilted her head. By who? He shrugged. The universe. God. The wind. Maybe just chaos with a sense of timing. She smiled, but it didn't last long. He's going to come back. Or send someone. Shaq nodded slowly.
Yeah, maybe.
And when he does, we'll still be here. Delara stared down at her notes, then back at the garden. You didn't have to help us. You know, you could have called the police. Sent us away. Protected your name. Shaq leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I didn't save you. Delara frowned, confused. What? I just saw you, he said. Sometimes that's enough. To change everything. To break the whole damn system. The breeze picked up then, rustling the trees like they were nodding in agreement. The garden, as always, told no lies. It only grew what it was given. As the sun began to set, casting the ranch in long amber strokes, the camera would have panned out if there had been one, pulling back from the garden bench, over the heads of two survivors and one tiny boy asleep, under a sky that no longer watched him like a target, but like a promise. But before the screen would go black, before the credits rolled on this moment of stillness, there would be one final image. A black SUV, parked far beyond the fence, engine running, watching, because peace isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of the next fight. If this story hits something deeper, good. Because the real world's full of benches just like that one, and people still walking past. You saw what happened when one man stopped. Now ask yourself, when it's your turn, will you look away, or will you stand?